Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited because the Women's Prize for Fiction is going to be announced in just 2 days, and for the first time ever, I have read all the books before the prize is going to be announced. I've been very lucky this year with time and kind of the timing of getting a lot of these books that I wanted to read. I moved to a new city in January, and I kept like a remote job from where I used to live. However, I only had about 10 hours a week that I had to work until quite recently. So I had a lot of spare time to read. It was a really nice break. I'd been in school and working through like 3 jobs before I moved, so I kind of decided I'm just gonna take a little bit of sort of time off and just chill for the first time since I was in like the 10th grade before I got my first job. And I was also very lucky with how the books lined up at the library. Sometimes it's very difficult to get the books available, and there were a few that I had to wait on quite a while. As well, I had to buy 2 of the books if I wanted to read them in time, and I'm quite glad I did. I liked these books quite a lot, but these were just 2 that I could not find at the library. I don't know if they are out yet in Canada. They must be by now, but at the time of buying, I don't know if they were. But yeah, I've read all the books and I have some thoughts and sort of predictions. This is gonna be a bit of a 2-parter video. I'm filming a couple days before the prize gets announced, and then I will include my reaction to the prize in this video. I feel like I'm going to be pretty happy no matter which book wins. I enjoyed a lot of these books quite a decent amount. Most of the books that were nominated to begin with, but certainly I think this is a really great shortlist, a very impressive one. And I talked quite a bit about a few of the books that I predicted to be nominated and that I was correct about, and that was The Marriage Portrait, Trespasses, and Pod. So I'm not really going to talk about these books too much in this video. They are in my predictions video, so I'll just leave it at that. But I will talk a little bit about the other 3 books that I did not predict, and that was Demon Copperhead, Fire Rush, and Black Butterflies. Demon Copperhead I also talked quite a bit about in my India vlog because I read that book while I was there, and so I did kind of quite a lengthy, honestly, review of it, I feel. So I also won't go into that one too much. If I remember to card that video somewhere up in this video, I will, but you can just check that video out because it'll have more in-depth thoughts. So Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver is a book based on David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, and from what I hear, it does follow the trajectory of that novel at quite a decent amount, but with a modern twist. Demon Copperhead is a story about a young boy named Demon Copperhead who grows up in the South, and a lot of the people he knows are living in poverty and end up living with an addiction. It's definitely a bit of a bleak book at different parts. However, it does have like a pretty funny sense of humor and way of telling the story that I really enjoyed, and that kind of, I don't know, made it like funny at times and was much needed like relief from a lot of the dark and depressing things in it, which I think were also important to read about, but can get to be a bit much, especially if you know someone who might be affected. Overdosing, the overdose sort of opioid crisis is not unfamiliar to many people. It's here in Canada too. It's probably in many countries across the world. So this is definitely like not an unfamiliar topic to us. And what I really liked about this book is it very blatantly called out the sort of stereotypes and mocking that a lot of people living in the southern United States get, and I think that's really important because I feel like a lot of people in the South are kind of painted with the same brush. Oh, they're all racist. Oh, they're all conservative. Oh, they're all stupid rednecks. And this book really took that to task. So that's all I will say about it for now. The next book I read was Black Butterflies by Priscilla Morris, and I really, really enjoyed this one too. I'm glad I bought it. I think it's a book I will reread again. This book follows an artist and professor named Zora, and it takes place during the beginning of the Bosnian War, and specifically the siege of Sarajevo in 1992. And so Zora and her family are living there, and she tells her husband and her mother to go to the UK, partially because her mother is quite ill. She wants them to be reunited with her daughter, and she can see that there is some trouble sort of brewing. There's a lot of already like ethnic issues coming about, but she wants to live in this sort of state of normalcy, and so she stays back in Bosnia while her husband and mother leave. And this book starts off so positively, and you know it's not going to stay positive. You know worse things are going to happen, not even from like a narrative perspective. This is just a historic, like a book that takes place in a part of history that you just know things are going to get worse. And until reading this, I didn't know that much specifically about the siege of Sarajevo. I didn't know that much even about the Bosnian War, and I didn't realize that the siege itself lasted until I believe 1996, so quite a very long one. So you just know things are gonna get worse, but they start off like quite positively in this book, and so Zora stays behind, and at first things are somewhat normal. I mean, you do see more and more conflicts cropping up, but she is still able to work, she's still able to paint, but suddenly these things do get taken away from her. And she kind of tries to make the best of it. She and a lot of her neighbors become a lot closer. You do see a lot more relationships develop between them, and she tries to keep that normalcy through doing art, through interacting with people she cares about, while having a difficult time being in contact and being away from her mother and her husband, as well as her daughter, who does live in the UK, so it's not someone she normally sees, but who she still hasn't been able to see or talk to in quite a while. I think this book might have been written the most kind of like simplistically out of all of the shortlist nominees. However, I did really enjoy it. I think it does still get into the characters' lives quite a bit. I really liked the relationships between Zora and most of her neighbors. I think they were very interesting to explore, very complex ones, honestly, in a time of conflict and trauma, honestly. And I mean, you definitely can like tell there's like this sort of like, I don't know, theme of like artist creation kind of battling against the destruction of war and terror, which I liked and I appreciated. There's a lot of sort of like metaphors like that around bridges as well. So yeah, very much enjoyed this one. Happy it made the shortlist, happy to have discovered it through this prize, because I don't think it has that many readers on Goodreads right now. I don't know if I would have come across it otherwise. And the last book on the shortlist that I read was Fire Rush by Jacqueline Crooks. It finally came in for me at the library. This was one of the first books I placed a hold on, and it kept saying it was on order for such a long time, and I was worried it wouldn't make it before the winner was announced, but it did a couple weeks ago, and I finally got to read it. I also really liked this one, but I had a very difficult time describing it to people. I brought this book to work and everyone was asking me what this book was about, and I just told them to like read the flap if they're really interested, because a lot happens in this book and a lot happens quite quickly, and I feel like a lot of the things that happen are a little spoilery, so I didn't want to, I don't know, go into it too much, and I'm nervous to describe it here too, although I'm sure if you're watching this book, this video, you might have read this book or have a bit of an idea of what it's already about. This book follows Yamaye, who is Jamaican British, and she and her friends are very into the club scene. She herself really enjoys singing and dancing and wants to be a musician. And quite early on in this book, she and her friends meet this man named Moose, who Yamaye becomes very close with. They develop a very close relationship together, and unfortunately a lot of tragedy strikes shortly after that, not just within that relationship, but within others in her life. And it kind of sets off a chain reaction where she journeys away from where she lives in London to Bristol and then eventually to Jamaica. This book takes place largely in the 70s and 80s. It does feature a lot about police brutality, specifically against Black people and other people of color in the UK, which I think is an interesting place to read this about. You hear a lot about police brutality in the United States, in real life and in literature, and I don't think you hear about it as much in other countries, but it certainly happens everywhere, and I'm sure was a lot worse before we had people who were able to film and get the news out in a much more effective way through social media than in the past. But this does talk about the ways that Black people and their allies did resist in this novel in the UK. There are a lot of other like difficult and traumatic things that happen to these characters, and it is sad to read about, but there is a sort of like resilience and hope in it as well that I really appreciated. And Yamaye is on the search for truth about her family, her relationships, and yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and I recommend it to everyone. If you haven't read it yet for the Women's Prize for Fiction, I highly recommend it. I will say a huge strength of this book was getting me attached to the characters pretty quickly. I think sometimes it can be difficult when tragic things happen fairly early on in a book. You don't always care that much, honestly, about the characters, who it's happening to, or the people around them. It's just like, oh, that sucks, like, but I didn't really know this character that well, or whatever. But with these characters, I don't know, I feel like I felt a lot of like sadness and sorrow for some of the things that were happening in their lives, and I think that is a testament to really good writing. So these are my thoughts on the shortlist books. They were all books that I enjoyed quite a bit. I think Demon Copperhead was the one that didn't work as much for me, but that's just because I didn't really want to pick it up too much. But when I was reading it, it was pretty good. It was interesting. I liked the message. And the other books, like, they were all 4 or 5 star reads for me. I think I gave Demon Copperhead a 3, but it was still a book that I liked and appreciated a lot. Like, I'm glad this book exists, and I know a lot of people liked it, so I'm very happy about that. Before I go into sort of a prediction that I want to do, I want to talk a little bit about some of the other books, because we had 16 books, and I do have thoughts. Just some brief thoughts though, because I don't want to make this video too long, and I just kind of want to talk about 2 books that didn't work for me too much, because overall I would say that this was a very good long list for me. I enjoyed a lot of the books. There were a few like middling books, for example, Stone Blind or The Bandit Queens, I enjoyed, but they weren't necessarily books that like will be super memorable for me. Wouldn't necessarily need to like own these books. I don't think I will reread these books. Same with like Homesick, Cursed Bread I liked a decent amount, but it was weird. I don't know if I'd reread it, although I'd be very interested in rereading or reading something more about like the events it was based on. But yeah, I think pretty much all the books on the short list I really liked, and those were some of my like top books, so I feel very happy that those are the ones that made the short list. There are a couple books that I hadn't already talked about that I wasn't a huge fan of, and I wasn't sure if I should talk about them, but you know, I really love watching videos where people just talk about books they don't like. Honestly, like some of my favorite booktube videos are like worst books of the year. I also like best books of the year. I've definitely found some good recommendations through that, but worst books, I kind of live for worst books of the year as well. And sometimes I find books that I do like on there and I'm a little like but you know, we all have different tastes. So I just want to talk about 2 that didn't really work too much for me. And the first book is Memphis, and this was the first book I read, honestly. It was the first one I found at the library. I think it's one of the ones that's been out the longest, and I really wanted to like this book because it has so much in it that just inherently are things I enjoy. I really like intergenerational stories. I like stories where you kind of watch or read about characters growing up, stories that take place through different points of time, stories that have different points of view. I really like all those things, so it sounded like a very good story. However, it didn't work for me. This is a story told about, I believe, 4 generations of women in a Black family, primarily from Memphis. Some of the characters end up moving back to Memphis because they had left, and a lot of the like trauma and things that they've endured. And part of that was something there was too much trauma in this book, and I feel like it was very shallowly discussed, and it just kind of kept coming that every like possible terrible thing could happen, and then it was sort of breezed by, in my opinion. I feel like the author should have maybe picked a few things to put in the novel and not just pack it with all sorts of terrible trauma. And I know there are people who go through lots of trauma, like you don't just get to pick 1 or 2 things, but this was a lot, and again, it wasn't delved into deeply enough. I also didn't really like a lot of the decisions that some of the main characters made that I feel like weren't questioned enough by either other characters, or like the author was just sort of accepting these things as like fine. But the thing that bothered me the most was just pretty much all 4, it's mostly 3, but kind of all 4 perspectives of these 4 women felt like the same person. And I know it can be hard to write different voices. It's something I struggle with in my writing. I'm not an author. I do sometimes write, and it is hard to kind of differentiate characters from one another. But I think if you're going to be longlisted for a women's prize, I think that's something the judges should have looked out for. And honestly, I think that they kind of, didn't consider that enough, because it really felt like the author's own sort of views and opinions were being put not just in 1 or 2 characters, but in all 4 of these characters. And these weren't necessarily even points of view that I always disagreed with, but it just felt a little unrealistic that 4 women, even though yes they are a family, would still hold all these like very similar views and have the very same like sort of tone of like thinking and speaking. And this was mostly apparent because one of our youngest narrators, Joan, I believe she's quite young when she is first introduced, or when her first perspective comes about. I think she's 12 through a lot of the book, or like in her early teens, but she still has the same kind of voice as her mom, as her aunt, to an extent her grandmother, and I don't know, it didn't feel realistic to me. I know it's hard to write children like when you're not a child, and so even if you are, but yeah, I don't know. So it wasn't totally a hit for me. And the second book that I wasn't a huge fan of is I'm a Fan. This is the last book I read, and yeah, terrible like main characters are such a hit or miss for me. I feel like sometimes I really like reading about terrible people, whether it's from like their first person point of view or not, but I really didn't like this narrator at all. And I feel like I have such a hard time telling what this book is about, because all it kind of is about is this narrator having an affair with this married man who is also having an affair with her and multiple other women. And I don't know what else this book was about, because there is like commentary on consumerism, on capitalism, on white privilege, on parasocial relationships, things that were quite interesting and that I, for the most part, enjoyed reading about. And I will say that is like a credit to this book. It did have some interesting commentary. It was also a little self-aware. However, there wasn't enough of that And I don't instantly hate everyone who has an affair in a book. I think, like, in Trespasses, I really enjoyed Arneri Kushla and the man she was having an affair with. I think they were both very interesting and I don't like good characters, not necessarily good people, but good characters. But I don't know, I'm a fan, which is very frustrating to read. And maybe if it felt like it was a little bit about a little bit more than just this woman's relationship with this man, I wouldn't have disliked it so much. But it was, to me, and I don't know, maybe I missed something, but to me it really felt like it was just that relationship, as well as her obsession with one of the other women that this man is sleeping with. Also, no one had names in this book, which again, sometimes it's fine. I don't hate books that say like, oh, the city we live in, without naming the city, or oh, the boyfriend or my boyfriend, like that's okay. But it was like the man I want to be with, the woman I'm obsessed with, the man I want to be with's wife, and it just got very tiresome to read because again, it was all this book was about. Another credit to this book is I don't think it romanticized like a lot of this behavior from the main character, from the man she wants to be with, which is good because I think sometimes books with sort of like these kind of not so nice narrators or perspectives sort of still do romanticize that lifestyle, and I don't think this one did. I think you do see a lot of the like self-loathing that this character has, which again was interesting if it was explored maybe slightly differently or with a bit more, I don't know, something more in this book than just her relationship with this man. And I think it's fine that the author wanted to, I guess, explore that sort of relationship, that sort of like very toxic relationship, but then it just wasn't the book for me if that's kind of what it was supposed to be. So these are all my thoughts on the long list and on the short list. Overall, very happy with the long list and super happy with the short list. I love this prize. I love getting to discover new authors and books every year that I do this. I don't really have too much of a prediction, honestly, and I will say I'd be quite happy if any of these books won. I'm mostly like rooting for Pod and Trespasses, but I would be extremely happy if Fire Rush won, if Black Butterflies won. I slightly less want the two authors who have already won a prize to win, just because I think it'd be very cool for an author who has never won before or one of the 3 debut authors to win this prize. So that's kind of who I'm hoping for, but I won't be like devastated or upset if Demon Copperhead or The Marriage Portrait win. These are books that again I mostly enjoyed, and I think they very much deserve their place on the short list. I feel like Black Butterflies might not win. I guess that's the only prediction I'll make. I don't think Black Butterflies will win. I don't know if that's kind of a cheap prediction because it's like 1 out of 6 or whatever, that I don't think will win. Sorry, yeah, I don't think will win. But yeah, I don't know, and that's partially just because the prose is a little bit like less literary than some of the other ones, if that makes sense. But I would be happy if it won. I think it was a great book, and yeah, rooting for Pod and Trespasses overall. And I will update you in a couple days. I'll try to edit this video quickly. I will be at work when the shortlist gets announced, or sorry, when the winner gets announced, so I really hope I can catch it live, or at least very shortly after, but I'll end up making the video when I get home anyway, so hopefully it'll be up that night. It'll be in the morning for all you people in the UK. I hope this video isn't too messy. I just wanted to very quickly make it. I didn't really have a script for it, just kind of my thoughts, so if it comes up a little messy, that's why. But I will talk to you very soon when the prize is announced.
2 days later.
If you're watching this, you probably already saw the live stream or went on the website and you know which book won, so I won't delay announcing it myself. There's no suspense anymore, but it is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. And you know, I did say that this was a book that was not my favorite on the short list, but I'm very happy for Barbara Kingsolver. I'm happy that it won. I do think, despite my own like and it wasn't like I didn't enjoy this book so much, it just wasn't, I know I wouldn't have read this without the prize or without it being shortlisted for the prize, and there's just something about it that made me not want to pick it up because I think it was a little tedious. Long books kind of get to me that way. I was also on vacation, so maybe it's a little bit of an unfair judgment. I really loved the message in this book, so I'm very happy that that's getting out. And yeah, it wasn't my favorite for some reason. It just didn't grab me in the way that some other books do. But nevertheless, I said I would be quite happy regardless of which book I won, and I was cheering for a couple in particular. But no, overall, I'm very happy. I'm very glad. Even though this is someone who won before, I think it would have been cool for a debut author to win or someone who hasn't won the prize before. But we of course have to look at the book's merit, and like I said, both The Marriage Portrait and Demon Copperhead are 2 books that very much deserve their place in the shortlist. and so I think either would have deserved a win as well. I did end up watching the prize get announced live, which was really exciting. There was a little bit of a live stream delay, which I think we're all anxious for, and I was like participating in the live stream. There were people commenting, and so many people were cheering for Black Butterflies, and I was like, oh my god, this is the one that I said just I didn't think was gonna win, just I had some vibe, and I was correct. But I was getting where I was like, it's gonna be so embarrassing. Like, I didn't make a proper prediction in this video. I just said, like, here's one book that I don't think is gonna win, which even felt like a bit of a cheat sort of like prediction. Yeah, I was gonna feel quite silly if it did win. Happy for the author, of course, but quite silly. I ended up watching the live stream again, and I really, like, I teared up at her speech the second time around. The first time I was at work and I was just kind of in between meetings when I was able to catch this, so like as soon as she finished her speech, I don't know, I was like, I gotta go. So I don't know, it didn't hit me that so much that first time. But I really loved how she said at the very end, literature is how we make our hearts grow bigger, and that is how we change the world. And I do think books definitely hold a spot in changing people's minds, changing the world. Both fiction and nonfiction, I think, can have a huge impact on us, and I think the books I've read have definitely shaped me, some honestly for the better and some honestly for the worst. But regardless, I don't know, I thought it was so beautiful. She thanked everyone for like showing so much love to kind of the part of the world she was writing about, for caring about these issues that are facing people in the South where she is from. And yeah, I love that. It made me tear up. It made me be so happy for her. So I won't make this much longer. I'm just happy, I'm excited, and there goes another Women's Prize for Fiction. It's always a little bit bittersweet, honestly, because I love following this prize. But on the other hand, now there's a lot of other books that I can get to, because I always end up prioritizing the Women's Prize for Fiction books that come in from the library or that I buy, like as soon as they come in. I mean, I might already be reading something else and I'll usually finish that up, but I will not start something else because I just want to get as many done before the prize announced. And yeah, I'm excited I was able to do it all this year. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you caught my other videos on the Women's Prize for Fiction, thank you so much for sticking around. I know I'm not like the top news for this prize, but I did really love talking about it, and it kind of inspired me to just start this YouTube channel. I've been thinking about starting it for a while now, for at least a year or two since I really got into BookTube, but I just never really took that jump until this year, and really until a month or so ago. And I felt like, well, I don't know enough about video editing, I don't know enough about cameras, I don't know if I can do this, but I just felt like, I need to talk, I need to make these predictions. I don't have a lot of people in my life to talk about books with. I did just recently join a book club, so I hope that'll be a good outlet. I do, of course, talk to this about some of my friends and my partner who do listen, but most of them don't read as much or don't read the same books as I do, so it's just nice to have an outlet to talk about it with, and that's why I appreciate everyone's comments and all the new subscriptions I've gotten. I really hope that you are getting something from my videos. I know it's mostly just my opinions and just me talking. I hope I can do some more in-depth literary analysis at some point, though I don't know, I was never an English major. I don't feel super well versed in that, but as I read more, especially as I read more literary fiction, I do feel like a little bit better equipped to talk about some things, but you'll mostly just be getting my opinion, and so I appreciate you sticking around for that. So yes, thank you again. I hope you all enjoyed following the Women's Prize for Fiction, and I will see you back with more predictions and more excitement regarding the long and short list of next year.